domestic situation that links right to domestic partners, children, and more. Let me tell you about Pluto. Pluto is a 1-year-old German Shepherd that's one of 3 dogs that live at a house in the mid part of Genesee County. They lived with a 36-year-old male, that male being the suspect, that suspect being Eric Robert Sevilla, and his 37-year-old domestic partner who they share a 7-month-old child with. The entire relationship has been an 8-year relationship that has been filled with domestic violence for nearly the entire 8 years, dating back to 2016. In incidents where the female victim has been beaten, has suffered black eyes, has had their clothes thrown in the washing machine with bleach poured in, their private personal records into a garbage bag with coffee grounds, toothbrushes in toilets, more beatings. These are common things that happen in this entire 8-year relationship. Together they have a 7-month-old child. And it all came to head in Livingston County in March of 2022 before they moved to Genesee County, where while she was pregnant, he physically assaulted her, causing injury. Judge Geddes from Livingston County issued a PPO with no contact in March of last year. Sevilla walked right through that paper. And as this victim moved to Genesee County, the PPO that kept him from having any contact, and one would think, why would you let them back in your life? And I think it's important to remember that people in the domestic violence situation are many times held captive, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, personally. And we found in this case that all that happened, that because not only of Pluto, there were 2 other dogs, there was a child, the other 2 German Shepherds, Chief and Juno, there was this family connection going on, but the violence accelerated. In fact, it was after the PPO that was taken out in March of 2022 that the violence shifted from the female in the domestic to the dogs, specifically the 1-year-old puppy named Pluto. In February of this year, there was an incident where the violence in the house became so aggressive that there was a surveillance camera put up by the victim in the house and captured video. And it captured video of threats against these animals that our investigation shows have been a history, to the point where you're going to hear the suspect and the charged individual in this account, Sevilla, say, I'm going to zip tie his effing legs together and I'm going to start whipping his ass to this 1-year-old puppy. I warn you, viewer discretion advised. This is video number 1 of the This is a video short clip that was taken by that surveillance camera in the house, delivered to animal control on February the 3rd of this year. We're so thankful to our relationship with animal control, the ACOs, which are animal control officers, that when this video was submitted for some help, that they immediately contacted our office. Sergeant White was my investigator assigned to this case, and we worked it. The suspect was taken into custody a short time after, and the suspect and all that evidence was put together. Now, what this case means and what it shows is that this accelerated violence involving weapons, and in this case, rope and a belt. And these weapons that you'll see on the screen, the belt that I'm telling you about was used in video number 2 to whip this dog and beat this dog, not discipline. There's a big difference between discipline and beating and torturing. In fact, the rope that you saw, our investigation shows, not in this case, that rope was most likely used in hog tying Pluto on the front and back legs and then thrown into a closet for 3 hours. But the belt you see, and the belt I have here, this was the weapon used by this suspect in video number 2. And again, I warn you, the audio and the video is disturbing. Let that settle in when I tell you that the purpose of that beating in the suspect's mind was because Pluto chewed up 2 pictures. That's it. Chewed up 2 pictures. It's a puppy. It's a puppy that is always going to be mischievous. It's a domestic animal. They will always need for discipline. But when you beat something, and when you beat an object that has life in it, but can't testify and can't make a statement, but he did more than that. And that's why he was charged with a 10-year felony by David Layton's office. There's an actual felony. It's a 10-year that involves using and coercing individuals, holding them almost in captive, in a spot where they have no place to move by the threats that you make against companion animals. And it is this. It's 750-503B3. It is a first-degree killing and torturing of a domestic animal with the intent to threaten, coerce, or control a victim. That's a 10-year felony. He was charged with that, as well as a misdemeanor of animal abuse, which is a 93-day misdemeanor. Can you believe that? In those 2 charges, when he was arrested, the judge gave him a $25,000 cash bond, and he bonded out. I can't control that. In fact, when he bonded out, he went down to Genesee County and committed another crime, a nonviolent crime against the victim. I say all this because I know that those watching right now and those that will share this story can relate to other stories they've seen in the past as to where domestic violence and child abuse and even violence against society has a direct connect to the abuse, neglect, and torture of animals. In fact, in this situation, you have a domestic violence victim who's been living in this hell for 8 years, who has 3 dogs, now a child, that the system has to protect and has to give a voice to. And that's why I said in the beginning that the violence that we see on this video is not immune to this county or to a domestic violence situation. But when we find out, when I say we, society, law enforcement, animal control, churches, schools, whoever has the ability to oversee individuals, when you see these acts of violence, you cannot sit idle. This is a violent act connected to domestic. It came to us because it was reported, but I'm asking and begging you as the sheriff, if this is going on in your house right now, don't wait till it escalates, because it's going to escalate. It happened exactly here in this situation over a period of time, with now a child involved, with more animals involved. And if you're a victim out there, please know that you'll be protected. Sergeant Sprague's going to include in this video into the description. I know our media friends from Channel 5 in Mid-Michigan and ABC 12 and our affiliates in Detroit and Metro Detroit that are watching, please add that to this story. That if you are involved, male, female, if you are involved in a domestic violence situation, it doesn't even have to include an animal. Just please use your voice for strength. You do not deserve to be in a captive relationship, a controlling, coerced relationship, especially when violence is involved. And in this case, it involved that against a female victim and an animal. We want you to get help. We need it to be reported. In this case of Pluto and the other animals, we're staying on it. And I will tell you, before we open up the questions, I hope this settles into you in a way that spreads the message that you cannot tolerate, you cannot excuse violence against either domestic victims, children, or domestic animals. They are directly connected. Here's an example of that. And law enforcement and prosecutors and attorney generals have no mercy. And that's what we're doing this story for. When you have somebody that is focusing on an innocent individual or animal, they have to be held accountable. And that's why we tell you this story. Eric Robert Sevilla, 36 years old, with a criminal history as a juvenile for petty theft, but yet a long history of domestic violence to this individual victim, that you're going to be held accountable. And we will not stop. And I will tell you, for the sake of these cases and more, that I have made a public statement as the sheriff and as somebody who loves animals, just like you, somebody who has a dog and a cat and bought his first pony at 9 years old and had Molly for 18 years. I understand the benefit and the love an animal has to a family, and that you have to protect that unit. that we can't just keep doing these cases and hold people on a criminal case and then they go back in the community and reoffend. That, mark my words, rest assured, I'm going to be the point person. I'm going to work with those that are already out there that are doing great work to make historic change. This is something that we cannot let idle, and we're not going to. So just stay tuned. Any questions I have from the media?
So what is the status of the victim and of Pluto, and has Savela, is he out on bond? Correct? He's out on bond?
Yes. We are working with the courts on the bond issue. That's a separate issue, but the question was the domestic violence victim is safe, and the 3 dogs are in her custody, as well as the infant 7-month-old. All of them are safe. We have our domestic violence victims liaison with them, and so they're there. They know to contact us at any time, but I can't control when people bond out. Go ahead, sir.
A question from back here. You mentioned the link between animal abuse and then how it transitions into abuse and violent crimes against people. Can you talk a little bit more about that, especially in light of recent cases that we've had of mass shootings and studies that have been done regarding a nexus with those?
So the question for the back from our Detroit market is, the direct connect, the link between animal abuse, neglect, torture, and domestic abuse, child abuse, and even abuse and mass shootings. And I have studied it, and there is a direct connect. In fact, of the domestic violence that happens in America today, 70% of them involve a threat against a companion animal. And of those 70%, 90% follow through with it, just like in this case. And when you look at young kids that are in the household, and you see other cases around the state that show animals being beaten and they're yelping and whimpering, and kids are watching this, you can't tell me there's not even a psychological connection. But I do recall an article in August of 2022, and I highly recommend that you pull it up, and maybe you could put it in the link in this description. But Time Magazine did an article in August. Mark Levine was the writer, and it showed that there's a direct connect between mass violence and mass victims, as well as animal abuse, neglect. In fact, 43% of the mass shooters have a history of animal abuse, neglect, and torture. The Oxford shooter, Uvalde, Parkland, they all have a history of abusing not just companion animals, I might add. These are innocent animals, birds and other large vertebrates that are not domesticated household cats and dogs. This is a wide swath of innocent animals. So yes, I'm convinced of it. I've seen it in my 30 years of policing. Anybody out there that's worked in this field can testify to it. We had a case that our prosecutor's office just went to trial because he beat this dog to death and had 2 other dogs that are stuck in the animal control now for going on 2 years because he won't give up ownership, and the jury found him guilty. I mean, it's a mess, but we're not going to stop, and we're going to fix it. Well, I appreciate it. I know this is disturbing, and I know it's difficult, but we use these cases to lift up those that need a voice and to give you that platform that we will fight for you. We will protect you. We will protect animals like Pluto from people like this guy. We will make sure that you have a voice, but all you need to do is take the first move. Violent crimes, coercion, and control have no place in a healthy domestic relationship involving men, women, animals, and children. Thank you for being with me, and until next time, be safe.